yes, you say, well, it's not going to work anymore. It's not going to work. I'm not going to do anything because I feel guilty. So what else you got? But that's all I got. Been working for years. Number 3, refuse to use guilt and blame on others. Refuse to use guilt and blame on others. Guilt is often a punishment. My mother was raised Catholic, so I say I come by my feelings of guilt and unworthiness, honestly. But my mother would take a mistake I made when I was 5, and she'd still be reminding me of it when I was 15. One of the rules we have in our house is if somebody breaks a dish or makes a mistake, it's never mentioned again. It is never mentioned again. We never bring up a past mistake. We say that when you're growing up, you make mistakes, and life goes on, and we never mention it again. We never get angry, we never blame, we never remind. It's just past event. It's like something that happened in a previous town, and it's never brought up again. Because only by reminding you of a mistake you made are you made to feel guilty over and over again. Now the 4th is to use the law of forgiveness. And this is perhaps the most important thing that I can share with you, because this is what changes people's lives. The law of forgiveness says that you are mentally healthy to the degree to which you can forgive and forget the grievances against you. In the Bible, in the New Testament, it said the principle of forgiveness. If a person hurts you, go with him 70 times 7. If you remember that you've hurt somebody, go and apologize to them. The principle of forgiveness, right up to the end of the life of Jesus, is the fundamental principle of Christianity. The ability to freely forgive is the mark of the truly developed, the superior human being. And that's why when you think of what they call the great mystics or the great lovers throughout history, they have been people totally without rancor or anger toward anyone, even people who put them to death. The ability to forgive is really the mark of how far you've come as a human being. So we say the people that you must forgive are, first of all, you must forgive your parents. Children grow up with ideas of things that their parents should or should not do. And those ideas may be based on reality or falsehood. It may be based on something someone said. When our daughter Christina was growing up, she was thinking of becoming a psychologist, so she visited a psychologist. And the first thing the psychologist told her was that she had terrible parents. Because we asked Christina twice in her lifetime to babysit for Catherine, just take care of her while Mom went shopping. And the psychologist told her, and when she was a very impressionable age, that that was an awful thing for her parents to impose on her, to ask her to babysit for her baby sister, which was at home while Mom went shopping. And she thought, wow, she didn't realize how badly she'd been treated. It took her years to recover from that. It took her years to get over this first impression. Remember, a prestigious person giving a piece of input to a vulnerable person? And it turned out, this psychologist turned out to be a bit of a wacko. And eventually nobody would send anybody to her. She was a teenage psychologist. But she would plant these sort of things in other kids' minds and turn their kids against their parents and raise their kids feeling that their parents had abused them because they'd asked them to wash their dishes or clean up their bedroom, and children should be free and not have to clean up their bedrooms. And I mean, it was just, anyway. My point was the first people you have to forgive are your parents, and you have to forgive them for everything that they ever did that you still feel angry or unhappy about. And the way that you do it is one of 3 ways. You can just say to yourself, I forgive them completely for everything, and I let it go. I forgive them completely for everything, and I let it go. And whenever you think of them, you say, I forgive them completely for everything, and I let them go. What I did to clear my mental decks is I forgive them completely for everything, I wish them well, and God bless them. I forgive them for everything, I wish them well, and God bless them. And I did this before my parents died, which is a good thing, because often people are still angry with parents who've passed away, and there's no ability to settle. But you can just say it to yourself. Just say, I forgive them completely for everything. I had one gentleman in my seminar who was still, he's 35 years old, still angry about something his father had done or said when he was 15. And he decided, because he was still making him mad, because he realized it in the seminar. So he decided he'd go over that night and tell his father, who was a working guy, rough, gruff, you know, never showed any affection at all. So he went over to his father's house. It was a Saturday after the seminar. And he said, Dad, I just want you to know that I forgive you for that thing you did when I was 15 years old. And he said, I don't know what the F you're talking about. I never did anything that requires forgiveness. I have no idea what you're talking about. And he suddenly realized he'd been mad for 20 years, and his father never even knew he did it. What a stupid waste of time, life, and emotion. He said, okay, Dad, no problem. And he left, and he was free at last. He was just completely free. In most cases, your parents never even knew what they did. Your parents only did to you what they knew how. Some people complain, my father and my mother didn't love me enough. But why do you think that was? It's because they weren't loved when they were children, and they didn't have enough love for themselves to give any away. And so the rule is your parents gave you all the love they had. They had no more. It wasn't as if you did something that caused them to withhold it. They had no more to give you than they gave you. They gave you all they have. And so therefore you can't be mad at them any more than you could be mad at a person who's in a wheelchair because they don't get up and run. Sometimes people are emotionally crippled, and all you can see is from the results. So what you do is you say, God bless them, I wish them well, and you forgive them. Sometimes you can go and see them personally. We have found in many cases that parents feel extremely guilty about all the mistakes they made with their kids. And so they're hoping against hope that their children will come and sit down and say, I forgive you and I love you. I spoke to a gentleman a couple of days ago, very interesting guy, very successful. He said he never had any truck with his father. His father was gruff, difficult, abusive, angry. His father was on his deathbed when he was 32 years old, and he went to visit him on his deathbed and say, Dad, I forgive you and I love you. He says, I love you too, son, and he died the next day. That's the only conversation he had with him in 20 years. Never seen him, never spoken to him, never had a conversation. But he says, thank God he did it before his father died, so he could make peace. One of the most important things you can do is tell your parents that you forgive them for everything, and you love them, and you wish them well. And it's absolutely amazing. From that point on, you become an emotional adult. From that point on, you move from being a child with this big evil parent looming over you, you move up to emotional maturity. You jump over the canyon, and from then on, you'll have the best years of your life with your parents. When I went through this with my parents in my late 20s, from then on, we were like friends, and we had just a great relationship for the rest of our lives, which was another 10, 15 years, because you let it all go. As long as the baggage is there, you still remain a child to your parent. The child is still, the parent is still the rigid disciplinarian, lording it over you with the emotional stick. As soon as you forgive them, you're free, and you become an emotional adult yourself. Our country is filled with people who are emotional children, emotional cripples, because they cannot forgive their parents. They're still angry with their parents. I was doing a seminar in Orlando, and this gentleman came to lunch with him. He said he had to get divorced from his wife after about 10, 15 years. And his wife was about 35 years old. And he has to still meet with her because they had 2 children, and they had children things to straighten out. And he said he had had lunch with her the week before, and she started off complaining about her mother, and complaining about her mother, complaining about her mother. And he'd heard this so many times. They got divorced about 3 years ago because he just couldn't take the negativity anymore. And he said to her, he said, Harriet, he said, do you realize that you haven't lived with your mother for 18 years? Yes, but my mother did this, and my mother... You haven't lived with her for 18 years. How many years more are you going to be mad about something that your mother did or didn't do when you were a teenager? Oh, yes, but my mother this and my mother... She was just like, just caught up with it, almost like Rain Man. You know, she could not let go of the fact that her mother did something that hurt her feelings when she was young. I read the story of a woman who's, when she was a teenage, she put on 20 or 30 pounds, and she came home one day and her father said, boy, you're sure looking porky. She was 35 years old and still an emotional basket case, still in counseling, because she had not recovered from her father saying, geez, you sure look porky. One comment, one time, when she was a teenager, and she was porky. And she still couldn't get over it. And she said she is still emotionally conflicted because she can't get over that comment from her father, which is one other way of saying be careful of what you say to your children because it can have a real negative effect on them. But look at the child. Why don't you let the child let it go? Okay. So we forgive your parents. Second of all, forgive everyone else. Everyone else in your world who has ever hurt you for any reason. And people say, well, I can't do that because of what they've done and because of what they hurt me and because of the cruelty and the years and the upset I had and so on. But remember this, forgiveness is perfectly selfish. As Emmett Fox says, every prisoner needs a jailer. Every prisoner needs a jailer. If there's no jailer, there's no prisoner. And so what happens is when you keep the person in prison, you remain the jailer. If you don't forgive them, you remain caught, almost like there's like those chains and leg links that prisoners used to be on the chain gangs. They used to be linked together. You're linked to the person by the chain if you don't forgive them. So the reason you forgive another person is to be free, is to liberate yourself. You don't care if the other person drops off a cliff. Now, in time, you will be completely neutral with what happens to the other person, but you let it go completely. You just let it go. And you forgive them so you can be free. People say, well, I can't forgive that person. It's a perfectly selfish act. It has nothing to do with the person. As a matter of fact, if the other person knew that you were still upset about something that happened, they'd probably be happy about it. Now, would you like to go around ruining your own life and making that other person happy? You'd probably want to kill that other person, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to hurt them by destroying my emotional life on a day-by-day basis. Does this sound a little absurd, by the way? You know, I'm going to hurt them by punching myself in the face over and over. I'm just keep punching myself in the face until I bleed, and that'll get that person back in Cincinnati. That'll really punish them. You'd say, well, that's absurd. Imagine if you took a hammer and say, that person at Cincinnati that I was married to, and whacked your hand with a hammer until it bled and the bones were broken. I mean, are you with me so far? This is absurd. And you know something? Physical pain you can take away with pills, but the emotional pain that you carry around with you is there all the time. So your job is to get free. And the way you get free is to just forgive everybody. You forgive people in your past, you forgive past relationships, past business deals, you just clean the deck, Because it's the mark of the superior person is they have no anger. They have no hatred. There's nobody that they're mad at. No matter what anybody else has done, that's their problem, so that's your problem. The third person is yourself. And you forgive yourself for every wicked, senseless, brainless, stupid, unkind, cruel, and ignorant thing that you've ever done. Now, all of us have done countless things in our lives that we feel badly about. And it's time to let it go. In fact, Emmett Fox says that clinging to negative experience in your past is actually a form of weakness. It's a form of emotional insincerity. It's a refusal to grow up and get on with your life. It's not a mark of being a superior person and feeling guilty because you made mistakes. It's just a form of weakness that keeps you away from reality. Because when you let everything go, you said, okay, I'm not perfect. And remember this, the person who made those mistakes in the past is not the person that you are today. In the past, that person made those mistakes. That was the person you were at that level of knowledge and maturity. You are not now that person today. The person you are today would never do the silly things you did in the past. Isn't that true? So therefore, don't beat yourself up today for a person that existed years ago. Because that was then and this is now. What you do is you say, that's not the kind of thing I would ever do now. And the wonderful thing is they say that wisdom comes from making mistakes. And you make mistakes in order to gain wisdom. And so what you do is you make mistakes in life, and the only thing you do with a past experience is what? You learn from it. You say, what can I learn from that past experience? And then you take the wheat and you let the chaff go. So whenever you think of a negative experience, you say, all right, what did I learn from that that's made me a better person today? And I always think on paper. I write down all the things I can think of. And you think, well, I learned to do more of this and less of that, and not to do this and not to say that, or think before I speak, and to do more due diligence. Due diligence has been my favorite word during the economic bust, due diligence. I wish I'd done more due diligence into the background of people that I was doing business with. But I didn't, and life goes on. You know, the money's gone, life goes on. So what you have to do is you say, okay, I learned to do due diligence and do lots of research, and let it go. Let it go. Remember, we never become upset about a past event, because you can't change a past event. Imagine a guy comes up to me in a seminar, and I said, how you doing? He said, oh, I'm doing fine. I said, you seem a little bit perturbed. Yeah, I said, I'm really pissed off. You're really pissed off? He said, yeah, I'm just furious. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, about 5 years ago, my wife, my family, and I decided to go on a picnic on Sunday, and we packed up everything on Saturday night. We're going to leave first thing Monday morning, about a 2-hour drive, and go on a picnic. And we got up on Sunday morning, it was raining. It rained all day. And we couldn't go on the picnic. And I'm still pissed. You'd say, whoa, bring in the guys with the white coats. I mean, you're still mad about the fact that it rained 5 years ago and you couldn't go on your picnic? You're still upset? Yeah, I'm still pissed. You think this person needs a checkup from the neck up. They're obviously got a serious problem. What's the point that I'm making? There are people that are still mad about things that happened 5 years ago that you can't change. They're gone forever. They've disappeared into the past, and they're still mad today for the mistakes they made or mistakes somebody else made. So what you do is you say, God bless them, I wish them well. Is I forgive them completely for everything, God bless them, I wish them well. And if you've done something to hurt someone else, go and apologize. Have the courage and the character to go to that person, write them a letter, make a phone call, send them an email, and just say, you know, what I did was really unkind and cruel, and I'm sorry, and I apologize. And then let it go. They say, what about the other person? You're not concerned about what the other person does or says or anything else. Just let them go. Many of us will feel guilty for years because we did something that we feel bad about. We did something that was unkind or cruel or something, and we feel badly about it, but it takes tremendous courage to go and say, you know, I thought about that, and in retrospect, I'm sorry I said or did that. I'm sorry about what happened. And if necessary, make recompense. If necessary, make compensation. It's really, really important. In the Bible, what is the word that they use is to repent. And to repent means to turn back. To repent means to turn back and go back to a past event and have done with it and deal with it honestly. And the whole purpose of those teachings is to free your soul so you feel happy about yourself. And just let it go. And once you've done it, by the way, you just let it go. Now, number 8. The last thing, which is not in this, and I'll leave you with, is, we'll take a break now. The last thing has to do with what we call the letter. And the letter may be written in your workbook. Please excuse me because I've only been over this about 25 times and 30 years. So if we go through here, releasing your brakes. Okay. Yep. List 3 people, the last exercise, 42, list 3 people you are still angry with who you are now going to forgive completely, and what one action are you going to take immediately as a result of what you have learned in this session. And let me just tell you about the letter. And the letter is where you have been through a bad relationship or even worse, a bad marriage. And I've met people 10, 15 years after a bad marriage who are still bitter. And as a result, they never meet anybody else, and they end up alone for the rest of their lives, because anybody who comes near them is like trying to stroke a porcupine. The first thing that they do is they start to spew all their venom about their bad marriage. And remember, what you dwell upon grows. So the more you think about your bad marriage, the angrier you get, and it just keeps you angry all the time. It's sort of very much like putting hot water onto black tea and letting it steep for a long time. What happens to the water? It gets blacker and blacker and blacker. And the more you dwell on a negative experience, the blacker and blacker your thinking and feeling becomes. So here's how you liberate yourself from a bad relationship. What you do is you write the letter. And the letter has 3 parts. The letter is, I have thought over our marriage relationship, and I forgive you completely for everything that you ever did or said that hurt me in any way. That's the first line. The second line is, to be specific, I forgive you for the following, colon, and you can write down every single thing that you think the person ever did to hurt you. Some people will come up with several pages. The last thing is, I let you go and I wish you well. And then you take the letter and you sign it, and you go down to the mailbox and you mail it. You don't email this, by the way, you have to write it, psychoneuromotor activity, and you mail it. Now here's the most astonishing thing. From the time the letter becomes irretrievable, you drop it in the mailbox and it's gone, suddenly, all the negativity of the relationship has vanished. It goes. It's almost like a zapper. As soon as the letter of forgiveness and wishing them well has been mailed, you're free. You're free at last, free at last. And you walk home singing. It's the most astonishing thing. I've had people come back from all over the world say they couldn't believe it. I had this man in my seminar, and he was sitting there, and he was, and you could see he was having some problems. And he came back. It was a 2-day seminar at that time. He came back the next day, and he was smiling, and he was beaming. He said, he changed my life yesterday. And he said, let me tell you what happened. Here's what happened. He and his college buddy formed a business. And they built the business for 10 years, and they built it into a multi-million-dollar business. And they both got married, and they both had children, and they're both the best of friends, and they worked together, and they built this business, and arm in arm, and they were just really successful. And one day, he went to the office, and his partner was gone. And his partner handled all the money, accounting, bookkeeping, and so he just went to work, went home that night, his wife was gone. And what he found was that his partner and his wife had been having an affair. They had carefully closed up everything. He had stripped the company bankrupt, and they had both moved away to the other side of the country. And they had carefully written, he'd signed whatever they put in front of him. You know, we just need this for the bank, and he'd signed it. So he ended up on the hook for everything, and they ended up with all the money, and it was legally untouchable. And then they moved away and left basically 2 families with children, and took all the money, left him bankrupt with I think, two or three children. And was this guy entitled to be a little bit angry? I mean, we're talking smoking here. I mean, he was angry, and he was angry. This happened about 4 years before, and he had to work his buns off for 16 hours a day to save his business. He had to take complete responsibility for his children, and he was just fuming. I mean, his best friend and his wife had stabbed him in the back so deeply, he was entitled to be angry. Would you say? He had not done a thing. He had been an innocent player this whole time. But he came to this seminar, and after he went home, he wrote the letter. He wrote the letter to them. He knew their address. He wrote the letter to their address, and he wrote it to both of them and said, I forgive you completely for everything. I forgive you for bankrupting the business and leaving me and blah, 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 and I wish you well. Have a good life. And he dropped the letter. He said, as the letter dropped, it was like the burden had been lifted off of him completely. So sometimes there are things that you can do to unlock that brake on the front wheel of your Mercedes-Benz mind and emotion and just release it completely. And a letter is very simple. But forgiveness is the most powerful technique ever discovered to free yourself completely from negative emotions, from all the ones in the past and all the ones to the present, and do it on a go-forward basis. So there's never anybody that you're angry with. No matter what they do, you are not going to give them the honor or the right of being angry with them. Is when the movie Patton says in his opening talk, he said, and I don't want to hear any calls from the front saying we are holding our position. We are not holding our position. He said we are not retreating. He said I don't like to pay for the same ground twice. He said we are moving ahead. We are going to kill the enemy. We're going to go through him like crap through a goose. Remember that movie, Patton? But he said we're not going to pay for the same ground twice. My point there is that we're not going to have the injury plus pay for it by being negative and unhappy and angry and frustrated and have it affect our lives and the lives of our family. Pay for it with money, pay for it with lost time, but don't pay for it twice. Just pay for it by saying, okay, it happened, I forgive the person completely, and get on with the rest of your life. So I want you to think in your mind, and every time you think of that person, say, I forgive them completely for everything, and I wish them well. And then I say, it's God bless them, I wish them well. I've already forgiven them. God bless them, I wish them well. God bless them, I wish her well. God bless them, I wish them well. Whenever the thought of the person comes up, I just throw a bucket of water on that negative emotion, and it goes out. And in less than a week, it stops coming up. The fire is out. And you think, geez, I was upset about that for weeks, months, years, and it's gone. Because you cannot wish a person to say, God bless them and wish them well without feeling great about yourself. And if you do that, you become completely liberated. And after lunch, we are going to, what we got